Next week, Canada will mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. September 30th became a statutory holiday in 2021, completing one of the 94 calls to action put forward by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The TRC created a historical record of the residential school system in Canada, the decades-long systemic attempt to destroy Indigenous cultures and force assimilation. There were 140 federally run residential schools in the country, the last facility closing in 1996. Our learnings on this part of our history continue today. With more on the importance of National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we are joined by Jonathan Hamilton-Diabo with the University of Toronto. Jonathan, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's talk first about the National Day and fulfilling one of the calls to action. What impact does this have to recognize this day as a country?
I think it gives us, as a country, a moment to reflect and to really focus in on the residential school experience, but also for many in the Indigenous community, it's also an acknowledgement, a formal acknowledgement for them to be able to share the experiences themselves or their families. Communities have experienced during this time. At the same time, to be able to educate people and to continue that education and that awareness, but also, I feel, to be part of, to really grow the relationships as well. It's a starting point. So I think that's what it allows us to do, is that moment of reflection and just to really consider the histories.
The calls to action, 94 of them, dependent on where you look, the number would shift a little bit on how many have been completed or fulfilled. I've seen the number, we've talked about this, 13 or 14 calls to action. Why is there a difference in opinion with how many have been fulfilled?
Well, I think some of it is depending on who's actually monitoring it. So if you have 14, but maybe there's others that were fulfilled, but to what degree? So again, it really depends on the perspective. So an example would be when the Pope came and gave an apology. So that was taken in very different ways depending on who you were. And for some people who were survivors, that was an acknowledgement. And that's, in some sense, that's all they wanted. Others felt that it didn't go far enough, in the sense that it didn't really name the church, it named more people in the church. So there were people who also looked at that. And then there was also the lack of any discussion around the doctrine of discovery, which others were looking for. Yes. So again, not everyone's looking for the same thing. And so it's around perspective and who's actually evaluating this themselves.
When we talk about the learnings, this also goes into our education system from, primary level, high school, post-secondary. It's very different what you're learning today from what was 10, 15 years ago, and hopefully we look 10, 15 years down the road, it's even more different. Where do we stand when it comes to representation within our education system and what we are learning from being a youngster?
Well, I think there's been some significant changes. First of all, even if you look at some of the schools, well, most schools, I would say now in Ontario, and possibly around the country, most of them would start off with a land acknowledgement, which was something that wasn't being done. So there is these kind of signs of the inclusion and recognition, and it's not just done in a special unit only, and then we never speak about it again. So I feel that it's being more integrated into the system. People are learning more. I'm finding with the students, the students, undergrads that I'm speaking with and I teach, they have their knowledge level is significantly increased if you look back 20 years, because most people, residential schools always been spoken about. It was, but even the awareness of Indigenous cultures and people and who they were, it always seemed to be our communities were always relegated to the past, right? It's their past, not current. And so I think that's shifting.
Right. Finally, for you, Jonathan, I think it goes without saying there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But where we are right now as a country, how do you think we are doing when it comes to our learnings and when it comes to our actions?
I think overall there is progress. But it's not saying that it's uniform, and there's a lot of areas that still we need to address. And sometimes what we're more focusing in on is the easier things and not really trying to dig into some of the structural components, even some of the mindsets as well. And those are some things that we're still being content with. It doesn't mean because we're moving ahead that all of the issues have been erased. They're still present, but I think there is more people willing to somehow be engaged, but I just think a lot of don't know how yet, and they're trying to figure it out. Plus, there's a lot, and I think that makes it difficult to try to comprehend those.
And as you said, progress, but this is also a process in that we need to continually be doing more and be aware of that situation that we are in, that we need to be doing more.
Yeah, we need to be doing more, and that the fact that reconciliation, or at least is a journey,
Yes.
It's not a finish line, and I think a lot of people are looking at when are we done? And it's not, because it's about relationships,
Right.
and we have a lot of things that we need to rebuild. There's a lot of trust that needs to be there, but it's happening. But it still will take time.
Yeah.
It still will take time.
Jonathan Diabo with the University of Toronto, appreciate you taking the time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.